as you can see, it doesn't start. Lights don't even turn on. And it just doesn't start. So let's talk about why it doesn't start. Okay, so in this situation, it is the battery. As you saw, the lights were not turning on. If you try turning on the headlights, they won't turn on. In this case, right now, because the car hasn't been sitting for a while, the battery is dead. And you can tell just by checking with the multimeter, the battery is dead. So right here we already have the multimeter set up. And you can see that it's only 6.5 volts. This is supposed to be providing 12 volts. So this battery needs to be charged. After we charge this, we can demonstrate that the car is supposed to work properly. But usually, if your car won't start, the first thing you should look at is the battery. Alright, so there are many reasons why your car might not start. I'm going to go through as many as I can remember. If I forget any, I'll mention them at the end. But first off, like, the way I group them is the ignition, electricity, the electrical system, and finally the engine. So you also want to think about the triangle of fire, like what is needed to start the car, which is you need oxygen for the fire, you need fuel for the fire, and you also need a source of ignition. So you also want to think about that when you're trying to diagnose this problem. But the first thing you need to do before you diagnose any of the problem, before you eliminate any of the possible sources, is charge the battery. The battery is probably the centerpiece of it all. You have to make sure that this works in order to check everything else out. Now, if the battery is weak, what's going to happen when you try to start the car is you're going to hear a crank. If you hear a crank, that means that the starter is fine. If you don't hear a crank, that means there's probably something wrong with the starter. It might also be something with the ignition unit inside the car. When you try to start it, well, actually, it might be something with the ignition unit, and the way you can check that is by checking the fuses. Next one that we're going to talk about is near the engine. Now, there might be a problem with the fuel, which means that it could be a problem with there's literally just no fuel. That could be a problem. It could be that the fuel pump isn't working, and it could also be like someone put in the wrong fuel. Instead of putting gas, they put in diesel, and that might cause the fuel to not be working. It can also be something with the spark plugs, like the spark plugs in the distributor caps. They might not be working, or nowadays they use the ignition coil. The ignition coil might not be working. And lastly, which is probably more rarer, the engine itself is seizing, which if your engine is seized, then you kind of have bigger problems. And lastly, the compressor. The compressor might be clogged, which means that it won't be able to work correctly. And the way you can check the compressor is not working is that you can actually turn on the AC, turn off the AC, which prevents the compressor from oh wait, I have to explain why the compressor is important. The compressor is part of the system where the serpentine belt goes. So as the serpentine belt is running across all these bearings and pulleys, it's going to go across the compressor. If the compressor doesn't work, then it's going to prevent the pulley from spinning. It's going to prevent the belt from spinning freely around it. So the way you can check if this is the case is you can actually turn off the AC and check if the belt still runs fine. Because if you turn off the AC, the compressor will let the pulley spin freely, and then the belt should go around. Okay, so that was quite a lot. I'll just go over it one more time. Battery, starter, ignition, fuel. Could be you don't have fuel. You put the wrong fuel, or the fuel pump doesn't work. It could be the spark plug, the distribution caps, or the ignition coil. Could be the engine, and it could be the compressor. So, of course, first thing you need to make sure that you do is charge the battery. And when we charge the battery and we try turning on the engine, it wouldn't crank. So that indicated to us that was probably the starter. And also, when we tried turning it on, the wire here melted. And so we looked that up, like why is the wire melting? And all the sources pointed to the starter being the problem. So we actually replaced the starter, me and my dad, and the car still wouldn't start. Let me just make sure it's boosting. Alright, so we're going to start it. Put the foot on the pedal. the brake pedal, not the gas pedal. Uh-oh. Okay, I'm a bit worried, but just in case, one more time. Not any more than that, because like I said before, if you dry fire it too much, might melt the wire. Hi, I'm Aiman. Welcome back to one of my auto repair videos. And if you've clicked on this video, you're probably like us. Your car is not starting, and no matter what method you try to fix it, no matter what parts you try to replace, it doesn't start. And I'll go over some of the reasons why your car might not start briefly at the beginning of this video, but in this video, today I'm going to show you a rare reason for why your car might not start. It's so rare that if you look it up, it probably won't be one of the first things that you see.